DMs frequently fall into the trap of writing out their story, which is a problem if you intend to have players. An RPG player is an engine that steers your carefully crafted story off the rails into something far more interesting than you could have ever planned. But I'm a writer, and I think it makes me better at DMing. That's not because I write everything beforehand, it's because I know how to write in response to prompts given to me by my players. In this video, I'm going to teach you 5 tricks that I use all the time to catch my players' prompt that I didn't expect and turn that prompt into something narratively meaningful. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where your character's tragic past is our favored terrain. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 11 years. The creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, once described the premise as being the words "but" and "therefore," which is incredibly useful. You can use a structure like that on any premise. Check it out. The 6th and 7th divisions of the Atroxian armed forces are tasked with taking the dwarven continent of Venkara with the aid of the 4th Fleet, but they can't make it up the Velatros River. Therefore, they reach out to the Special Tactics Branch Expeditionary Group to take out the Star Bastion that protects the river at the Velatros River Lock. But they'll have to hold it while the reinforcements arrive from both sides. Therefore, they are going to be in incredible danger. That is the start of an adventure. The players play the Expeditionary Group sent to help the Army and Navy who need the players to do a difficult mission. The princess has sent a message to a powerful samurai to save her, but she's locked in a deadly castle that's heavily guarded. Therefore, the heroes must face deadly odds to save her. But that's going to be very tough to do as it's full of bad guys. Therefore, they could try to sneak in, but then how do they get out? If they get spotted, they might have to escape under duress. Also, an iconic fantasy adventure, even if they do have laser guns. Star Wars is fantasy, not sci-fi. You can at me, you'll just be wrong. The reason this is a good writer's tool is because it's replacing the words "and then," which is kind of like a mortal sin. Take any premise and replace the "and thens" with "buts" and "therefores." This doesn't remove the linearity, but it replaces the sequence with reasonable consequences of the premise. You could summarize Star Wars with, and then the princess reached out to the samurai, and then they snuck into the deadly castle, and then they escaped. But by treating it as a string of buts and therefores, you can string the conflict together as a string of natural consequences of the other. But the castle is full of bad guys, and therefore they might have to be clever and sneak in. Be careful with this trick though, because it can be a trap. Notice that in my examples, I used "but" and "therefore" to describe the challenge ahead, not the solution. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but the core premise should be describing the situation the moment the players arrive on the scene. In the Velatros River Lock example, the players weren't playing the army who realized they needed help. They were the help, the expeditionary group, here to be badass and kick ass. The premise describes the starting situation, the game we're about to play. You certainly could use the "but and therefore" method to describe an entire adventure or even a campaign from start to finish, but you'd be painting yourself into a corner. To either abandon the work that you did the moment the players start solving the problems presented in a fun way, which can feel bad, throwing out your work isn't a fun time, or you start constraining them to the solutions you had in mind, which sucks because their ideas are probably more fun than your own, if only because they came up with them and they want to do them. So don't prep that far in advance. You can have an idea about, what is the adventure about, who the bad guys are by planning a campaign back to front, but don't actively prep them until you're about to run them. Only prep one session at a time. There's a common thing I see online with DMs wanting to spring a big twist on their players, which for me always brings to mind the classic twist between surprise and suspense. There's this Alfred Hitchcock example where he talks about 2 people having a conversation at a coffee shop, and then suddenly they explode. The whole coffee shop just boom, gone. That's really surprising. But the thing is, surprise is easy to do. You can just sort of blow up anything. He said, imagine the same scene, but we cut to a close-up of a pipe bomb underneath the table. It's got a timer and it's ticking down, and we cut to the conversation, which is about something innocuous, and back to the bomb ticking down. One person gets up from the table and the bomb keeps ticking, but the person returns to ask the other character about something that the audience doesn't think matters because we know the bomb is still ticking. A waiter comes over to take an order and the bomb keeps ticking. Someone drops something on the floor and they reach underneath the table, inches away from the bomb, but they don't notice it, and it continues to tick while they fumble about grabbing something off of the floor. That's suspense. And it's a way stronger hook to keep cinema goers engaged. and by extension, keep your players engaged. Spoilers for Vecna, Eve of Ruin in 3, 2, 1. You, as the DM, can go and say, "This wasn't Mordenkainen, it was Cass the Betrayer in disguise the whole time, and aha! You have surprised your players." But surprise is cheap and easy, and it doesn't keep us hooked until after the twist has happened, because it just sort of happens to us. As a player, when you get surprised, you're the victim. I think Vecna, Eve of Ruin would have been a better adventure if the premise had been Cass the Betrayer asks the players for help. And the whole adventure leading up to the inevitable betrayal is a question of, can we trust Cass? When will the betrayer betray us? I don't know, maybe he wants Vecna dead as much as we do. You keep them in suspense. Surprise villains are easy. You can always reveal that Boondoggle the Goblin was the secret BBEG, or you could make sure the players are constantly in suspense about being betrayed by a character they don't trust, but they're actively working with them. You put untrustworthy characters in front of your players and leave them in suspense as to what's going to happen next. I think that's just kind of objectively better. I like telling my players that they're working with an untrustworthy character, telegraphing it beforehand, and even having the NPCs say, "You can't trust me, but you can trust that I want the same thing as you do right now." I think that's guaranteed to keep players hooked. Which brings us nicely to the original DM advice guy on the internet who said it best.
And drama is tension and resolution.
Drama is tension and resolution. Will the players ... Question mark. Will we trust what's being told? Will they succeed in the near impossible task? Will they be able to convince the NPC, defeat the lieutenant, save the townsfolk? That's a dramatic question. Will the heroes ... Everything tends to be elevated when framed as a question. Can Luke save the princess? Can the party infiltrate the Death Star? Can they escape with their lives? When you need to turn a moment in your campaign into an adventure that you can play, try and see if you can frame it as a dramatic question. Can the expeditionary group hold the Star Bastion while awaiting reinforcements? Then, once you have a dramatic question, you turn it into an encounter that produces drama. With our expeditionary group, we reach to a combat objective from our video on those a while back. Reinforcements arrive in 10 turns. Can you hold off the wave of combat until then? That's a dramatic question. I have a huge collection of modular prep. Adventures and dungeons that I can sort of reach for at a moment's notice and use in tonight's game. Hit Point Press's Big Bad's Most Wanted is exactly that. They've been making a Boss of the Month scene for over 6 years, and now they're collecting issues 26 through 50 and making one big book out of it. And adding a whole bunch of new content to boot. It's 250 pages with 25 boss monsters or more. They all have, full backgrounds, tactics, and stat blocks, and over 90 adventure hooks so that you can take those things and immediately plug them into your campaign and run them right out of the book. Or you could decide to build a campaign around them with their new campaign guidelines. And with 25 boss monsters in there, you are going to find something that you can use right now, hell, even tonight. So do yourself a massive favor and go check out Hit Point Press's Big Bad's Most Wanted by checking out their Kickstarter page before it closes April 2nd. Link in the description. In simple writing terms, an adventure is a set of two things: intention and obstacle. I've spoken about this on the channel many times, but I think I explained it best when I said, let me tell you a story. The cult of the Screaming Mass wants to end the world. Octavia the Paladin heard about them and then she stopped them. Technically that's a story, I guess, but it's shit. That's because there is no obstacle blocking her from achieving her intention. Without obstacles, you're not really telling a story as much as you're sharing an anecdote. So how's this? The cult of the Screaming Mass wants to end the world. Octavia the Paladin heard about it, and she wants to stop them. But she couldn't find them. So she had to gather allies who might know and assemble a party. Only the party wasn't working together at all, so she had to forge long-lasting relationships with them. But one of them is previously a member of the Screaming Mass cult, and Octavia wonders if she can trust them. Each scenario I just described adds a new intention for Octavia, and new obstacles, which invite new intentions. That question of what happens next and can Octavia achieve her goals, that question, that's the story. Which is a similar idea. The players intend on holding the Star Bastion, but their obstacle is the enemy reinforcements that are coming now. The good guy reinforcements come in 10 turns. That's the obstacle, the wave combat. In D&D, your obstacles are probably mostly going to be combat scenarios. You want the Sword of Moonlight, intention. It's in the Labyrinth of the Goblin King, obstacle. That's the dungeon crawl version of an obstacle. But it could be that you want the King's Army, intention, but he doesn't want to hand it over, obstacle. The key is this: how the players overcome an obstacle is up to them. A quest giver may inform their intention, the bad guy sets up the obstacle, but then it's up to the players to go from one to overcome the other. The fifth trick is a bit more advanced. The want and need is used when telling stories as opposed to plots. A plot is the mechanics of the narrative, basically how one thing leads into another, or what the bad guys are up to and when the players learn about it. Story is the human element. In Star Wars, since that's our running example today, the plot is the rebels, the Death Star, the Empire. The story is a Luke wanting to see the universe and learning to believe in himself so he can become one with the Force. The story is about what it means to be human, or what it means to live in the world we live in today. It is about family, relationships, believing in yourself, distrusting authority, that kind of thing. The plot is the machine. When constructing stories, writers tend to think in terms of wants and needs. And these are usually contradictions, but not always. Luke wants to be a hero, but he needs to accept the Force to do that. Once he's given into his faith, he can become a hero. But you can go a different route. In The Dark Knight, Bruce Wayne wants to stop the Joker as Batman, but he needs to inspire the people of Gotham so that they don't need him anymore. They move beyond him. In The Godfather, Michael Corleone wants to protect and strengthen his family's power, but he needs to escape this life and start his own. And he fails. His want gets the better of him. There isn't really a trick to deploying these. I don't think you can apply wants and needs, but if you start thinking in those terms, you might find the dramatic questions that you can pose to your players about their wants and needs. It can help tie in their backstories. Being a DM is a lot like leading a writer's room. Every writer in the room needs to be a part of the conversation. You need to be open to ideas from the room because together you will all elevate the stories together. As the DM, you alone can't write a compelling story because there's other people wanting things and they are writing the main characters. And those main characters will determine what the story is about. All you can do is control the plot. And even then, I think you only control it like a little bit. There's this great article from Justin Alexander about don't prep plots, prep situations. And he's right. Since plot is the sequence of events in the story, and your players are going to be deciding how to overcome the obstacles of the story. They write the plot with you. You just write the situation or the obstacle. The players write how they overcome it, and they write their own story since they're in charge of the story, the human element. So what you're left with is being the facilitator, making sure these things sing along in harmony, to catch the ball when it's thrown to you, and throw it back, to be prepared. Be prepared! Which is also an important point. Prepping is in railroading. If you prep right, you do it in such a way that the players are never breaking your prep. They're just solving it in their own way. You can do that by creating situations, creating obstacles, creating tension, and helping figure out a player's need as opposed to their want. You're writing in a writer's room, and the players are writing with you. I think I'm a better DM because I'm a writer, but that's not because I write everything beforehand. I write at the table. I'm inventing my side of the story based off of the prompt my players give me. I take their prompt and I see if I can apply one of the tricks I talked about on top of the prompt. The but and therefore, the surprise and suspense, the intention and obstacle, the tension and resolution, or the want and need. I want to overthrow the king, says the player. Well, it sounds like a want, first of all. I think the need could be something like I need to understand where power comes from. It's going to have plenty of obstacles, which can be broken into suspenseful moments of will the king find out? What will the king do when he finds out? As well as thinking of the dramatic question that creates tension. Can the player overthrow the king without the king finding out? Which likely leads to, now that the king has found out, can the player do this and survive? I'm always catching the prompt and working off of it, whether I'm prepping before the session or at the table, and making sure to respond like a writer in a writer's room, and following dramatic statements up with dramatic questions. So invite your group to become writers with you by deploying some of these tricks at your table and see if you can't use them to hook your players further. You'll quickly see that suspense, dramatic question, tension all work together to keep players perpetually engaged, to come back to the table and keep playing this awesome game that we are all playing together. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend.
It's bedtime.
If you want to support us directly, consider joining our Patreon for our Discord, our actual play, a digital magazine, rules PDF, a huge catalog of extra videos, monthly newsletters, and more. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. And until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.